Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri and welcome to another illustration video tutorial. So for this week's tutorial, the main request was that I draw a female werewolf. Now I did try quite a few different methods and different styles of the character design before I actually settled on a very specific one. You will see throughout this video that I actually tried a couple of different methods, experimented with it, decided whether or not I wanted to keep it. This overall image actually took about 8 hours to complete, and it was completed to a more finalized stage compared to most of my previous works. And the first thing that you'll notice is that I actually started with a more panoramic view. The reason why I did that was so that I can actually just rough out on the same page essentially multiple thumbnails of the character design to figure out how I was actually go about posing out the character. Once I had that information settled on, I then copied and pasted it into a new file to ensure that I had the right formatting so that I knew that all that was set up correctly. I tend to use very standard sizes when I'm painting in Photoshop, just because it makes it easier for me to do printing of these images afterwards. Because they are standard framing sizes essentially that I paint in, it gives me a bit more flexibility later on. So as you can see, as I'm starting this out, is I just added some really basic colors to start off with, and I kept them very light. The main reason why I did that is I was trying to avoid going too dark an image too soon. It's something that can happen very easily if you don't watch out for it. It is a lot easier to add darker areas afterwards than it is to normally remove or lighten up an image. I find that if you start in reverse, what tends to happen is your overall image tends to be too dark in general, and you don't necessarily require really dark shadows in order to really portray a certain level of detail. It is easier to paint something that has a lot of dark shadows in it, just because you wouldn't see most of that information anyway. But if you're starting off lighter, it's a really good exercise because essentially you're forced to actually figure out the proper proportions, figure out how to actually draw these individual portions of the character much more thoroughly, because any mistakes would actually show up a lot easier in something that's a lot lighter. So for this reason I started very light. I was using this as more of an exercise, figuring out my technique, and experimenting a lot with the character. I did essentially two main variations of the face. I'm working on the first version essentially right now. It turned out okay, however the main problem I ended up with is that she looked too feline, and because she needed to be a werewolf, that was the very opposite of what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to achieve a more dog-like appearance. But she is female character, so I played and toyed with this prospect to see how human-like I could make her, and to figure out if I wanted to have her in a fully transformed state or more of a partially transformed state. So essentially what I ended up doing is, you'll see later on, I don't want to ruin it for later on in the video, but I settled on a very much a different design that we currently see here for her face anyway. As I was doing this, I was looking at, once again, a lot of reference material. That tends to be my staple on any illustration, is I try to gather up as much information about the subject matter that I'm trying to draw, specifically because it helps me figure out the anatomy. So at this point I have decided to actually go for a more human-like appearance for her facial anatomy. So I'm experimenting with the shapes to see just how werewolf-like I want to actually make her. I do want to have a very soft appearance to her face because that does portray her as being more feminine. So the main thing that I had to watch out a lot for is not to overdo the nose portion specifically, because overdoing any of that information would make her look either more masculine or too animal-like. Once again, that's something I was trying to avoid, so it was very important that I try to respect some of the subtleties in the nose structure. So the main thing that I had to do in this case, because I did change the design quite a bit, is I was looking at a lot of female model reference, and I was actually looking at a mirror to see how my face would actually look like if I actually extended my mouth in a certain way and my jaw. So I was using myself as a reference and also Google Images as a reference. So it's a really quick way to get reference material, and it really helps out in your overall drawing process as you work, because I'm not trying to understand these things as I'm going, and it helps speed up my entire process in general. So as you can see, I'm playing around with the arm musculature. I do want to portray the fact that she has a lot of strength, so she is toned, but it's also, once again, a very, very close balance to describing that information without overdoing it, because she is a female figure, so you don't want to overdo the muscle structure either. So I had to watch out for that as I was working on her. So that's another focus that I kept closely an eye on, because I didn't want to overdo it. So just adding the background elements right now. Now this overall image is still extremely light colored. I have not added too much dark aspects to it yet. I will be adding some darker points shortly, and I started experimenting with different layer options, seeing what worked best, until I finally settled on this one, where I just essentially added a color burn layer and then directly sampled the information from there so that I would get the appropriate colors that I needed for it. So not liking those initial colors, I used it as a starting point and restarted until I actually ended up with a comfortable balance between the two. So it was a combination of the color burn tool as well as just directly painting the information in there. I found that painting the information in there gave me more of the effect that I was trying to achieve, so I just kept it to that level. You do have to, if your image is too light, I find that you will have more issues using the color burn tool, because essentially it just darkens whatever colors it sees. So you can potentially end up with harsher colors that you may not necessarily want. Now, because she is in a partial transformation state, I wanted it to look as if she was, her clothing were destroyed to a certain level. So because she's partially transformed, she's no longer the same size of clothes. So I really wanted to showcase that effect. So I added a tearing effect to her clothing design as well. Now, another thing I wanted to include is the idea that she was maybe, with her claws, when she was actually transforming, the pain may have actually caused her to tear some of her clothing to a certain degree. So I did want to show that a bit too, but without overdoing it as well. So that's something that I wanted to include in there, and that's why she has very disheveled looking clothing at this point. So I'm just refining some of the finer details. Once again, I'm trying to keep the information very subtle and not to overdo it, because it's very easy to overdo the information at this stage. She's nearly completed. As you can see, I'm just adding the finalized highlights to help make her pop out from the background a bit more. And I'm just tweaking some of the shadows in certain key areas. And in the final illustration, you'll actually see me really tweaking the hand for the majority of it. If you want to have your say on what's drawn for next week's video tutorial, or have some additional questions about my drawing process, please leave a comment below. I will take the feedback you guys give me and try to answer your questions while working on next week's painting. If you want to see some of my previous works, please feel free to check out the annotations on the side of this video, or visit my channel for the full playlist. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you and take care.